And one thing, the timing of your WWE run is kind of paradoxical in the sense that it couldn't have come at a more perfect time for your character because of the Canadian Canada versus USA angle. So it was perfect for your character, but then for you personally, it kind of came at a bad time with injuries and the tribulations that you went through from that. Talk about the way things went after WWF, the tribulations you had with addiction, and ultimately your redemption in Christ, and what role faith plays in your life now today.
Well, I was never injured in a WWF ring, not one time. My injuries were well before I got to WWF. As much as I loved working for All Japan, and I still do consider it the highlight of my career, in one way, it was very bad for my career, and that was the physicality of it. The matches there were very, very physical. And I probably did things a guy 280 pounds shouldn't have been doing, flying off that top turnbuckle every night, doing drop kicks off the top turnbuckle. I remember Stan Hansen pulled me aside one night, and he said, all that stuff looks good for a big man. He said, but you're going to cut some time off your career if you keep doing that. He said, you need a finish where you don't have to leave your feet. And he said, you need moves where you don't have to jump off the top turnbuckle. And I thought, yeah, right, Stan, whatever. You can't do it. That's the only reason you're telling me that. But he was right. He was exactly right. And so I had a major, major knee injury. That knee has since been replaced 3 times, which I've had 4 operations on. So I was damaged goods when I got to the WWF. And I wanted so bad to work there and sort of wind my career down there that when I received the physical. Now, they do things different now because of probably things like this. But back then, they mailed me my contract. I had my attorney overlook it, and then I signed it. And then they mailed me the form that I could take to any doctor and have a physical. Now, their doctors do physicals now. But I had a buddy of mine that was a doctor in Indianapolis, and he was one of the doctors that would write scripts for all the boys. And I mailed him that physical, and he filled it out for me and never saw me. I never visited his office for that. He never saw me. He gave me a clean bill of health. So I literally covered up my injuries and basically was untruthful with Vince and those guys about how bad I was injured when I got there. And I knew when I got there that I was on borrowed time. I had no clue how long I could last. I didn't think it would be long, and it wasn't long. Those injuries finally caught up to me, and I just could not continue to go. The one thing that I had counted on my whole life at that point to get me a scholarship to college, to get me an opportunity to play college football, to allow me to become a first-team All-American football player, get tryouts in the NFL and become a pro wrestler. My body allowed me to do all that, but now my body was failing me, and the end was in sight. Now, along the way with these injuries in the business that I was in the world of pro wrestling, the last thing you want to do is take time off the road to heal or have surgery, because out of sight, out of mind, this business keeps moving on without you. And if you take a year off to heal, to get better, to have a surgery and rehab, you could come back and lose all the momentum you had. And I didn't want to do that, and neither did other guys. So I was on the road one day. I had surgeries before in college, but I really don't recall taking pain meds. I'm sure I was prescribed it after surgery, and I'm sure I took them, but that was about the extent of it. But I'm on the road one night, and I'm complaining of an elbow that is swollen up like a tennis ball. And I'm with John Nord. He's driving. I'm sitting in the back seat, and Kurt Hennig is sitting in the passenger seat up front directly in front of me. And I was just complaining about how bad I was hurting. And Kurt said, well, what do you take for pain? And I said, well, I take goody powders, which are a very well known thing here in the States. It's just basically acetaminophen in powder form, and you can wash it down your throat real quick and it takes effect real quick. And Kurt turned around and he looked at me and he laughed at me. He said, you take goody powders? He said, dude, you need to get your doctor to write you a prescription for Percocet. And I said, what's a Percocet? He said, you got to be kidding me, man. He said, how have you made it in this business with not having Percocets? He said, here, and he handed me 4 of them. He said, take one before the match tonight, one before you go to bed, one vice versa. I mean, do the same thing tomorrow. And innocently, just to try to get through a match without pain and to continue to do what I was getting paid good money to do, I took those Percocets. And it took a few years, but those 4 he gave me eventually worked themselves into 120 a day. I had developed a horrible addiction. And I had to take 15 to 20 at a time. I would always chew them up, get them into powder form, and then wash them down with water, Gatorade, whatever it was. But I had worked my way up to 120 pain tablets a day. Now,
Wow.
I was also still using the sleeping pills, the Halcyons, the Valium, the Xanax, the Somas. So when you count all those other medications in, along with the pain pills, I was taking over 200 pills a day. And at this point, the doctors had started cutting me off, Jonathan. They would no longer write me prescriptions. They knew that I had a problem. And I got a doctor that I'd never been to before. I went to him and was able to sort of trick him into writing me a prescription for pain pills. And what I did was I made a copy of that prescription that he had written for me because it's got vital information on it. It's got a doctor's DEA number. In the United States, a doctor's DEA number is the equivalent of his Social Security number. It's the
Yeah.
number that identifies him as a doctor, and it also has his license number on it. Now, that same doctor that was prescribing all the pills for the boys and that rigged up the physical for me, I'd been around him enough in his office, and I'd heard him call prescriptions in for other boys. I'd be sitting in his office when guys would call boys I knew wanting prescriptions, and he'd call them in. So I learned what to say, and I learned how to say it, and I learned the lingo and the language and what needed to be said. So I one day I got the nerve up to call a prescription in. I pretended to be the doctor, and it worked. I did it again the next day, and it worked. I did it again, and it worked, and it started working. And so I was calling in my own prescriptions, and that is a felony in the United States. That's a felony in the state of South Carolina where I live. So after getting by with it many times, then I started getting caught, and I was arrested 28 times for prescription forgery. And I guess because of my name recognition in the state, from what I did, my days at Carolina, playing football there, being an All-American, and also the name recognition, being a worldwide known professional wrestler. The criminal justice system took it easy on me. They would find me, and it would happen again. They would find me, it would happen again. So they decided to put me on probation, and I kept doing it. So then they put me on intensified probation. And I kept doing it. Then they put me on double secret intensified, probation, and nothing would stop me. I was a full blown junkie, and eventually all that caught up to me. And when you're living a life like that, it has a ripple effect on everything around you. It affected my family, which I lost. My wife divorced me. It affected my finances, and eventually it affected my freedom. I had gone before a judge one time who put me on probation, and then had, on 2 other occasions, intensified that probation. And this last time I went before him, he said, Mr. Wilkes, you've given me no choice. He said, but I'm going to have to literally send you to prison. He said, I sentenced you to 5 years in the South Carolina Departments of Correction. And he said, I'll suspend it to 18 months. And so I did almost a year in the prison system here in the state of South Carolina. And it took that for me to get sober, clear-headed, and realize what a huge mistake I'd made, and what a fool I'd been, and how all this had just such in a negative way affected my life. I grew up in a good Christian home. I was raised in church, and it was there that I leaned on my faith to help me get out of this, because I had made a big mess, man, a big mess, and I'd done it all on my own. But I was incapable of cleaning that mess up. I couldn't do that on my own. And I just relied on the Lord, and his strength and his goodness and his graciousness and his mercy and his forgiveness. And I got out of prison in February, about Valentine's Day of '03, and things have been good since.